Okay, welcome to Afternoon Art Club. I'm Miss Kim. Today is our first session of our March Afternoon Art Club for first through third graders. We are going to be starting a new project today talking about landscapes. So we're going to be looking at some examples of landscape paintings from the Florence County Museum's collection, and we're going to talk a little bit about those landscape paintings. So we might be able to kind of pause the video some and you guys talk with me about landscape painting today. We are also going to start our own mixed media landscape. Mixed media is just a term that means that we're going to use a lot of different materials and processes to make our own landscape. We're not going to just paint or just draw. We're going to kind of mix it up and use lots of processes to make a really cool landscape design. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to share my screen with you. And we're going to start out by looking at some landscapes. All right. So I'm going to pull up my chat box. Remember, if you have any questions, please put those in the chat box until I pause the recording. And then I'll let you unmute if you have questions. All right, so, All right, we're gonna start out by learning a little bit about landscapes. Now we're gonna be looking specifically at paintings today. So everything we're going to look at is a painting, but a landscape does not just have to be a painting. It could be a drawing, it could be a print, it could be any art media could be a landscape. So let's take a look. What is a landscape? A landscape is a drawing or a painting of scenery. Now that could be outdoor scenery that is just natural. So it could be a painting or a drawing of the mountains or a river or a beautiful field or any natural element. So that could have trees or grass or dirt. So lots of different parts. Lots of different natural elements could be in a landscape. But a landscape can also include man-made elements. So things like buildings or roads or houses. Any of those things can also be in a landscape. So when we look at landscapes, we might see just natural scenery, but we also might see man-made scenery when we look at a landscape. Now, sometimes when we're talking about landscapes, we hear some other words, things like seascape or cityscape. Those words are just kind of categories or different types of landscapes. So if we see a landscape painting of the ocean, we might call that a seascape. Landscapes that have a lot of water in them are often called seascapes. And if we see a landscape of a city, then we might call that a cityscape, but it's still a landscape. So I hope that makes sense. Now, in this painting that you see right in front of you, this painting is by an artist named William Henry Johnson. He's one of my favorite artists to talk about because William Henry Johnson was an African-American artist that was born right here in Florence, South Carolina. He was born right here in 1901. And actually this month is his birthday. On March 18th, William Henry Johnson would have been 120 years old. So 120 years ago, he was born here in Florence. He became a really well-known artist who became very, very important to American art history. So he's a really important artist and he's from right here in Florence. So I love to talk about him. This is called, the title of this work is Seaside Landscape. And so we can see some of the things I was just telling you about. We can see things like trees, and we can see grass, and we can see maybe a little dirt path right here, and we can see the ocean behind it. So all of those elements are a part of a landscape. Now, when we talk about landscapes, we talk about three things normally. We talk about things that are in the foreground, the middle ground, and the background. And this is really important that we're gonna take a few minutes and look at this and talk about this. In a landscape, the foreground are the things that are closest to you. The middle ground are the things that are kind of in the middle. And the background are things that are very far away from you in the painting. So let's take a look at that. What do I mean by those things? So let's take a look right here. The foreground, the middle ground, kind of in the middle, and the background of a painting are the way an artist makes a two-dimensional piece of paper or canvas, which is just a flat piece of paper or canvas, look like it's three-dimensional or like it's going back into space. So let's look at this painting. This painting is called Sunset Landscape. It's by an artist named Edmund Lewis. And let's look right here. In the foreground, the things that are closest to us are usually found at the bottom of the paper. So look right here. Do you see this painting? The things that are at the bottom of the paper look like they're closest to us. They're usually a little bit bigger than the things in other parts of the painting. And then if we back up or move up the paper, the things in the middle of the paper, or what we call the middle ground, are about middle distance. So they're not closest to us and they're not farthest away from us, but they're about in the middle. And the things that are in the background or the farthest away are nearest to the top of the paper. They're nearest to the top of the paper. And oftentimes they're very, very small. So these mountains in the background, even though they look small, are way bigger than the rocks in real life, but because they're very far away, they look small. So this is a way that an artist can show us how close and how far things are away from us. Now, we're going to look at a landscape painting together in just a moment. We're going to look at one together, and then I'm going to pause the video and we are going to talk about it just a little bit. And while we're looking at that painting, I want you to think about a few things. I want you to take a few moments just to look at the painting and really look closely at the painting I'm going to show you in just a moment. Then I want you to ask yourself, what do you notice? What do you notice about the painting? Anything you notice is okay to say. So tell me anything you notice. We're going to look for landscape features that you might see. So we're going to look for things like trees and mountains and maybe buildings or maybe water. We're going to see anything you can see that's in that landscape. And then I want you to think about what are the things that are closest to us or the things that are in the foreground. What are the things that are kind of halfway, medium, far away from us, or the middle ground? And then what are the things that are very far away from us, or the things in the background? So let's look at that painting really quickly. All right, this painting is by an artist named William Halsey, and this painting is in the collection of the museum. It is a landscape painting, and I want us to look at it for just a moment together. Go ahead and take a moment to look closely at this painting. Look very closely at it. Whoops, I made it go away. Look very closely at the painting. Okay, now I am going to pause the recording and we're going to take a few minutes to talk about it. I'm going to let you unmute yourselves and we'll be able to talk about it. So I'm going to pause the recording. Okay, so now that we took a few moments to look at a landscape painting, I'm going to share my desktop screen with you and we are going to create a landscape painting together. So let me share that screen with you. Hopefully it's working. Please, No, it wants to do weird things every time. Let me try to get it going here. Hold on one second. It's my, try to get this going one more time for us. It just wants to do weird things. Okay, I'm gonna do it a different way. We're just gonna use the camera. I don't like doing it this way, but it will work. Okay. All right, guys, I'm gonna get this camera set up for you here. Sorry, I had it all set up and it was working fine before we started, but you never know. Okay, I'm gonna zoom in on our desktop, and then I'm going to kind of lock the focus here for us. Actually, I'm gonna lock it more like here. All right. Okay, guys. So now, oh, it didn't lock. Hold on. There we go. All right. So now we are going to work together on a landscape. So let me show you what supplies you're going to need to do this project. I've got a bunch of stuff here. This is only, there we go, it's a little better. Okay, so you're looking at my desktop, and on my desktop, I have some white pieces of paper. I've got some little pieces because I've already cut these. So what we're going to do today is we are going to make some papers that next time we're going to cut and glue to create our landscape painting. So what we're going to do is take one white sheet of paper. Now I've got 3 sheets of paper here. You'll probably need about 3 sheets of paper to do this project. So if you're using a kit that you got from us at the museum, it will take you 3 sheets of paper. If you are using your own paper from home, you'll need 3 pieces, but today you might only need 2. So you can always just start with 1, whatever you have, but it will take a total of 3 pieces of paper before we're all finished with this project. So the first thing we're gonna do, oh, let me back up. Here are the other things you're going to need. If you are using a kit that you got from the museum, you're gonna need your watercolor paint strips, and your paint swab, and your crayons, and some water, just a little cup of water for the watercolor paint. I also like to have this is just an old washcloth that I use for painting, but if you have a paper towel, that works great too. Something that is not, it doesn't matter if it gets paint on. So this kind of washcloth, you can see it's got lots of paint and yucky stuff on it. I always use this for painting. All right, so we're gonna start with just the paper. Oh, and you're also gonna need scissors. You're also gonna need a pair of scissors. So I'm gonna move some of that out of the way because we're gonna start with just scissors and paper. And what we're gonna be doing, remember I told you at the beginning that this is a mixed media landscape, which means that our landscape is going to be made up of a lot of different artistic processes. So we are going to start by making some papers that we can cut out of to make a really cool landscape collage. So what we're going to do is start with 1 sheet of paper, and I have it sitting the tall way right now. And I'm just going to fold it in half. Try to match up your corners if you can. Just kind of fold it in half, just like that. Okay? Fold it in half and open it back up. All right, now I have kind of a line down the center, a crease down the center. You can see that really easily right there. And I'm gonna use my scissors. I have big scissors, but you probably have smaller scissors from your kit if you have a kit from us at the museum. And I am just gonna cut right down that crease. So I'm cutting my piece of paper into 2 pieces. I cut it right on the line. So now I have 2 equal halves. If it's not exactly, if your cutting isn't perfect, you can see I got a little bit kind of wonky right there. If your cutting isn't perfect, that's okay. The only way to get better at cutting straight lines is to practice. So it's good practice, good cutting practice. Okay, now that I have 2 halves of my paper, I am going to fold these 2 in half the long way to get some even smaller paper, just like that. And what we're going to be doing today is creating some pieces of paper that have lots of different cool paint textures and patterns on them. We're going to be doing lots of painting to paint our papers in a fun way so that we'll have some really cool colors and textures to make a collage landscape out of. So I folded that in half, and just like last time, I'm just going to cut that on the line. Just like that. Okay? So I've got 2 like that. I have some I already cut so that you would not have to wait too long for me. So I've got 4 pieces of paper that are this size. So this is 1 big sheet of paper, and I cut it into 4 strips. I just folded and cut. And then when you have those 4 pieces, you can set those 4 pieces to the side. And you're going to get 1 more piece of paper. I see some folding and cutting going on. You guys are doing a great job. And you can take your time. Remember, you're going to have several weeks between now and next class to finish this up. So you don't have to be speedy about this, but just kind of keep an eye on what I'm doing. Once you've cut your 4 strips, you're going to fold another piece of paper in half, and you're going to cut along that line so that you just have 2 halves like this. So what you should have are 2 half sheets of paper and 4 quarter sheets of paper like that. So you should have this and this, like that. So take your time cutting. If you're not finished cutting, don't worry about it. You can either take a break from cutting and move on to the next step along with me, or if you don't want to do that, if you want to finish cutting before you start the next step, then just take your time. Don't be in a speedy rush, and then just watch me as I'm working. These next steps are really going to be just whatever you want them to be. So I've got these papers, and in the end, I'm going to glue them to a big sheet of paper. But what I want to do is think about what the areas of my landscape are going to be. So we know a landscape has a foreground, a middle ground, and the background. And remember, when we looked at some landscapes, we looked at how the things at the bottom were usually the closest to us. So maybe I want at the bottom to have some grass, for example. So I'm going to use just 1 little strip because grass isn't very tall. I'm going to use just 1 little strip of paper here. And you can either, I have some watercolor paints like this. So you can use watercolor paints. If you're using supplies you have at home, you can use just any old watercolor paints. If you're using supplies you got from the museum, then you have watercolor strips that look like this. These do the same exact thing. So whichever you're using is totally fine. And I'm going to show you with both, actually, so you know exactly that you can use any of these supplies. Now, I have some crayons that were in my kit, and I'm going to get those out too. Now, I love using crayons and watercolor paint together because it's kind of like a magic trick. Crayons are made from wax, and wax pushes water away. So anywhere that we draw with a crayon, anything that we draw with a crayon, our watercolor paint cannot stick to it. It just kind of rolls off the crayon and onto the side. So I think I'm going to use my yellow crayon to make some little squiggly lines. I'm going to make just some zigzags here, kind of grass-like zigzags. Some are big, some are little, and I might do some more down here. All we're going to be doing with our strips of paper is creating some patterns and paintings that we can use to cut from. So if I want the grass to be at the bottom, I'll be able to cut some really cool grass out of this paper I'm making. So we're just going to paint the whole strip of paper, and we're going to let these strips of paper dry for next time. And then next time we'll use these, we'll cut these strips of paper out and we'll use them. So this is very yellow. It looks really bright on the screen. And now I'm going to do a little painting over it. So you can just watch me here. I'm going to use, now remember I showed you, you're going to need some type of a cloth, whether it's paper towel or just like an old cloth. I've got some water. I have my paint swab here that came with my paint strip, or you could also just use a paintbrush if you have one. So these are the options of what you can use. And this is what I'm going to be painting. So let me show you how I'm going to do it. Because I think I want this area to be what my grass is made out of, I'm going to use green. And if I'm using the paint strip, I just want to put a little bit of water on the paint strip, just like that, and let it kind of sit there for a minute. You can see that the paint is already getting picked up. And look at that, I can just paint right over the top of my crayon, and the paint does not stick to my crayon. I love that about watercolor and crayons. This is going to be such a cool piece of paper to cut out grass from. Now, your piece of paper doesn't have to look anything like mine. So just remember that. Yours can be completely yours. It does not have to look anything like mine. You might want to have water at the bottom of yours. You might want some water at the bottom. You might not want grass at all. So if you were doing water, you might want to use blue, like blues and greens, and use swirly lines instead of using the kind of lines that I'm using here. So you can see I'm just using my paint strip. I'm also showing you if you're using regular watercolor from home. Whatever you're using will work perfectly for this. So we're just creating some strips of paper that are painted right now. And if you don't know if you want yours to be grass or water, then maybe do a couple of paint strips. Maybe do one of grass and one of water, and then you can try it out when you are building your collage next week. So just painting away here. Okay. And I'm adding different colors of green just because it makes it a little more interesting. And I have that paint. But whatever paint you have, if all you have is the paint strip, then that's great. You're going to come up with great things. You could also use the green crayon and the yellow crayon. If you're using watercolor paint and you want it to be lighter than it is, if it's too dark, for example, then just add just plain water to it. If I want some really light green over here, I just add some plain water. Just like that, okay? So now I have one strip of paper ready, and this is what is gonna turn out to be my grass next time. And this might be a lot of painting for you all in one day. So if you want to paint a few paint strips today, and then over the next few days, do a couple every day, then by the next time we meet, you will have some paper that's ready to go. So I think that when it's time, when this is all dry, if I cut some grass out of this paper, that's going to look super cool. So I'm excited about that one. I'm going to set it to the side. Now, maybe the next thing I want to do, I'm going to use one of my bigger strips. And remember, it does not, you can use all little strips. You can use some big, some little. But for this one, I'm going to use a big strip. It's all up to you. You have 4 little strips and 2 big strips. And I do encourage you to use all of them, to go ahead and paint all of them. Even if you don't use them all, you'll have them next class for us to choose from. And I think that you will appreciate having that. So the next step is I'm going to make some water. So I may want this to be an ocean or a river in my landscape. So what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to use my crayon again. I'm going to use crayon and paint in all of the strips I use. And I'm just going to do some kind of swirlies. They help create texture and create a cool pattern. Some can go this way, some can go that way. So I'm just using some spiral lines. Some can be really big, some can be really small. Any line pattern that you can think of would work really well for this. You could use straight lines, you could use curvy lines, you could use dotted lines. But think about what you want that area to be. So I knew that I wanted this to be water. So I want to think about what kind of lines remind me of water. And when I think about water, I think about swirlies. I like having some little ones and some big ones all mixed up together. All right. Okay, friends, look what we have. So I've just done a little swirly pattern with my crayon on my paper. And now I can start painting. Now again, I can use my paint swab. I'm throwing things. I can use my paint swab and my paint strip, or I can use my paintbrush and watercolor paint. Whatever is easiest for me to find and use is perfectly good to use. And I kind of like using a combination just because I have them and because it's good for me to be able to show you that you can use different kinds of things. So I'm going to, oops, I lost it. Hold on a second. I don't know where you guys went or where I went, but I'm going to try sharing again. I think it went away. Okay, let's try again. There it is. Okay, good deal. All right, it disappeared for a minute. I'm not sure why. Okay, so now I'm just painting this in. And I can add dark colors and light colors. I can add the blue from my paint strip. I could add purples and greens, any color that kind of makes you think of the ocean. Blues and greens, cool colors, that's what we call those. Colors that make you think of the water, we call those cool colors. And you can tell I'm not going really slow. I'm just kind of painting quickly. Just painting all around. If you remember, if you want areas that are lighter, just dip your brush in the water and spread that paint around with just water. You don't have to use a lot of paint. And I'm using some different colors just to kind of mix it up a little. But what I love about this is that there's not really anything that you can do wrong. It really looks so fun and cool no matter what. And it will look really cool if I cut a little river out of this paper. It'll look like a swirly river. Swirly whirly river. So remember, next time we're going to take all these papers that we've painted and we are going to cut them out, and I'm going to show you how we can actually just tear them. We can tear the paper to create a really cool and awesome landscape. So your job for this week and next are just to get your papers painted. You want to have 4 little strips and 2 big strips painted that are all different textures. And I want you to think about what you want them to be. Do you want them to be water? Do you want one to be like a mountain? What kind of textures do you think it would look like if you were painting a mountain? Maybe we'll do a mountain one next really quickly before we're done today. If we wanted to paint a mountain, how would that look different than our water, for example? All right, so far we have some really fun grass and we have some swirly whirly water. I'm going to set this aside to dry. And before we go today, let's do one more. Before I go, I'm going to do one more, and I'm going to show you maybe something like a mountain. Okay, so I only have 4 colors because I am using the crayons out of here. But if you have crayons at home, you can use any color crayon that works for you. So if you're doing a mountain, you might want to use brown or black or gray. But because I'm just using the ones that I have here, which will also look amazing, I'm going to pick a color I haven't used. I have not used green or red yet, so maybe I'll use both of them. And when I think of mountains, I think of kind of pointy rocks. So what I'm going to do is maybe put some pointy rocks or pointy arrow kind of triangles on this paper. And I want to use several colors. I like to kind of mix them up a little. And I could even do a few blue also. You could do a little bit of every color. And then when I add my paint, maybe I want the only really bright color that I used to be my mountains. And now I'm going to use maybe black paint to create that kind of stony look, the rocky, stony look. And again, whether you're using the watercolor from your paint strip like I am, or you're using watercolor from a little watercolor tray like this one, it will work. And the watercolor will not stick to the crayon. So this could be kind of brown and black, gray. Looks kind of gray on the screen. It looks a little more black in real life, but on the screen it's looking kind of gray. So I'm going to keep adding. Oh, there's some darker. Keep adding color. And this might be a really fun one for mountains. So you can think about, as you're going through and making your textured papers this week, remember you need 4 little strips like this one, and then you also need 2 of the thicker strips like I made my water out of. I'm gonna add a little bit of brown too, just to mix it up a little. But you know, if you don't have brown, you can mix the black and the red together and that'll give you something kind of close to brown. The black and the red on your paint strip, I can show you what that's gonna look like. It'll give you kind of a brownish color. Looks a little too red right there, but you have more than one paint strip in your kit, so if you're running low on any of your paint colors, you can switch to a new one. And just keep going. Paint your whole strip. Don't forget just to use some water if it's too dark or you want to thin it out or blend the colors together. You can always use just water. And as you let your watercolor papers dry this week and next time when we come back together, I want you to have just a whole stack of your watercolor papers. So you're going to have 4 of these small ones with different textures and colors on them. And if you don't know which ones to do, you don't know any other colors or textures, just make something up. Make one really bright and colorful like a rainbow, or make one with little lines that look like rain. Maybe you could add a background that looked like it was raining in the background. So there's so many things that you can add. Think about the natural elements that we talked about, things like grass. You could do something that kind of looked like a field with flowers in it. The way you would do something like that is maybe just take your paper and draw flowers all over it. You could just draw some little flowers on your paper in different colors, like this. And then paint over the whole thing green. And then you'd have what might look like a field of wildflowers. That would be so beautiful. So anything you can think of will be a wonderful, beautiful texture for your landscape painting. Now I'm going to stop sharing my screen so you can see my face again. All right. Now, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining me today. Remember, next time we are going to take all these papers that we started, and mine are starting to dry. They're not too wet. I didn't use all that much paint. There's a lot of sunshine today, so I'm dodging the sunshine. I'm happy for the sunshine, but it makes the screen a little weird. Okay, so get all those papers painted, and the next class, bring all your papers back to class, and I'll show you how to take them and turn them into an amazing landscape. All right, I hope you guys have a wonderful week. I am going to stop the recording, and then if you have any questions, you'll be able to ask them. Thanks, guys.